Well, our special guest for this next hour is going to be Bob Fletcher. And Bob has, of course, done a lot of investigative reporting. He actually makes videos. I do talk radio. Bob makes videos, excellent videos, and I think we carry just about all of them. How are you doing tonight, Bob?
Okay, and I'm pleased to be here.
All right, fine. Well, what are we going to talk about tonight? We were going to talk a little bit about the strange death of Sonny Bono, and then we can talk about really whatever you want to talk about. But Bob has done a great deal of investigation. He knew Sonny. He actually had sent a report, one of his reports, to Sonny Bono, who was going to actually to open investigation as soon as he got back from the ski trip. But he never got back. You pick up this story, Bob.
Well, it's amazing today watching, of course, all of the attention that Michael Jackson, the performer, has gotten with his death. And it was a surprising, surprise death, 50 years old. We'll have to wait and see what turns up to be the real reason for his death. And maybe it was just a simple cardiac, or maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was something else. But what struck me personally is, and I had been in the music business the earlier part of my life. At a rather high level, I was a promotion director for MCA and Universal Motion Pictures, and had been involved at the very high professional level and executive management in the record and music business. So I had kind of a special feeling towards any of the performers that were really great. And of course, this Michael Jackson was, and whether a person likes him, or thought much of his personal life, and which of course I know nothing about, and most all of us don't. But whether you liked him or not, he certainly was an extraordinary entertainer. And but it bothered me to see the amount of attention given to his death, and of course there's the DEA, Drug Enforcement, is involved in it now, and the FBI, and of course the local police have gotten profusely involved with the investigation and looking into his death. And I had done a special report for Congressman Sonny Bono, and a few years back, and had put it in his hands. As a matter of fact, it was at the request of his office. I carried out this special investigation, which was a very in-depth investigation into drug smuggling and murder and other related interfacing with money laundering connected to it, etc.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Well, Bob, go ahead. You were just saying, of course, that you'd done these investigations and into drug smuggling and murder, and of course there was a question of some even CIA involvement in this, and so you'd carried out this investigation for Congressman Sonny Bono, and you'd actually given him a copy of your ultimate video and report. So go ahead.
Right, and the report, the final report, was done on video. And it was there was a specific reason for that, and that was that I had the extraordinary inclusive part of it. Extraordinary parts of it was that I actually had major drug warlords and drug smugglers themselves, and high-level cartel persons, the bookkeeper for the Medellin cartel, the an interview done by a friend of mine on the hill in Burma by the Burmese drug lord Kun Sa, who had come forward and had actually named the names of people in the United States government at extremely high levels, which included at that time a person who was the Assistant Secretary of State for the United States of America. His name was Richard Armitage. He was named specifically by Kun Sa, the drug exporter, one of the biggest drug exporters in the entire world. And this was all done on live videotape for the report I did to Sonny. So when Sonny finally got to review it and go into it in depth, he actually had it for a few months before they got back to me. And when his office got back to me, I was living in Los Angeles at the time. They called me, and they said Sonny was livid, that he couldn't believe the extent of high-level involvement in narcotics, and it was just making him crazy, and that he was going to begin within only a couple of weeks. He was going to open up an extraordinary, in-depth investigation by the Congressional Intelligence Committee. And they had already set up in advance the ability to have subpoena powers. They were going to be able to subpoena people directly and bring them to the floor of the United States Congress before the Intelligence Committee, and they were going to finally do an investigation that should have been done years earlier. Myself and other persons had tried several times and attempted to get that level.
Hold that thought, or we'll be right back here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Bob is just been commenting on the drama surrounding the tragic death of Michael Jackson. Certainly an excellent entertainer, but almost a hero's death. Unfortunately, probably related to overuse of drugs. Everything points in that direction. But certainly contrast that then with the death of Congressman Sonny Bono. And of course, Bob had been working with Congressman Bono. He had actually prepared a report for him, and Congressman Bono was going to actually hold congressional hearings going into the involvement of the CIA and key people in the government in the drug trade. And certainly there was some footage in this report, which we actually carry by Bob Fletcher on drugs, going into the fact that one of the major people behind the drug trade in the United States, according to a man named Kun Saw, who headed the Golden Triangle area there in Burma. Well, man was Richard Armitage. Now, I'm sure that nothing was mentioned. The fact of Richard Armitage is part of the ruling elite. He said at the time when he was identified as being in charge of the buying of the drugs there and from Burma. Why, of course, he was working in the White House. Today, he's a member of the Trilateral Commission, has been a member for many years. But Sonny Bono was going to investigate all of this. He had the ability to subpoena people and call them to come before Congress to testify. And so pick up the story there, Bob.
And so finally, Sonny did go over it and over the report and decided to move forward. This would have been, without a doubt, not only the biggest thing that Sonny had ever done in his political career, which, by the way, had started to be very, very positive. He was doing some good work, and he had been well respected up on the Hill. People originally, of course, it was a little bit of a joke when he first went up there, but they had turned their heads around in the right direction, and he was doing a very good job. He had decided to move forward with this investigation. Now, I had received my phone call approximately sometime around, I believe, about the 21st or the 15th of December, something like that. And the telephone call was from a fellow named Frank Cullen, who was actually running Sonny's offices for him, pretty much the main character there at the Washington, D.C. offices for Sonny. And he said, Bob, this is the first thing on this calendar when we come back from the Christmas holidays, which he said we're about to take off here in a couple of days. They will be gone for a few weeks, 2 weeks or something like that. It's a typical Christmas holiday for the United States Congress. And the first thing when we get back is going to be the investigation. Sonny's ready to go, and nothing's going to stop him, and we're going to be underway. They asked me if I was ready to come into Washington, if necessary, myself, and could I supply them with any additional information and backup on the rest of my report. And I said absolutely, I was ready to do it. I was enthused. I was very excited. And the idea of an extraordinarily serious inquiry into major persons in our government, by the way, both Republican and Democratic, had nothing to do with parties. They spanned both parties, and both parties at the highest level had been involved with money laundering, drug smuggling, and murders, assassinations, and was all interfaced together. And there was, again, as I say, live on our report, which I did for Sonny, there are statements by very high-level drug operatives themselves that explain who they worked for and how and what they were doing. So we hung up the telephone. I was overwhelmed with the idea that we were going to move forward in such a grandiose manner. And son of a gun, 10 days later, I, like everyone else, sitting in front of my television, and Sonny Bono was dead on the ski slopes. And, of course, they told us that he had run into the tree. And, of course, with myself, my very first thought was, what kind of a coincidence was this? This is so extraordinary, and very few people die from running into trees on a ski slope. You actually, according to official records, you can die more easily or more likely that you will die by being struck by lightning in the United States than dying on a ski slope. I immediately called Frank Cullen, the person with whom I was dealing on a regular basis in Sonny's office, and to my maybe surprise and maybe not surprise, he would never take my phone call. This was a gentleman with whom I had worked for a couple of years, and on a regular basis, if I was into Washington for some reason or another, I would stop by, even if it wasn't to see him, but I would stop in and would look him up, and we'd have a cup of coffee or lunch or something together, and all of a sudden now he will no longer take my telephone call, and that was as of 3 days after Sonny's death. So instantly, my concerns with the fact that Sonny maybe had been stopped before doing his investigation became very serious. I started looking into things. I did the best I could, and I kept running into more and more hurdles that I had to jump, and being stopped by every possible direction when I got into investigating. I did finally, without getting into the whole thing, which of course is available on a new a DVD that we've put out recently. Matter of fact, both the report that I gave to Sonny and the new report on Sonny's murder is available for anybody that's interested. But to get back to the story itself, as I got looking into it, and I actually finally was able to get a hold of the autopsy. And this is one of the reasons that really had pushed me in the direction to spend so much time and effort on this thing, and that was the fact that the autopsy was being very secretive. They were not releasing it even to Sonny's own mother. She had a heck of a time getting a copy of the autopsy, and I ended up working with his Sonny's mother's attorney, and with her assistance and others that were involved with it, I did finally get the autopsy. And when I went over the autopsy, I was open to the fact, I said, okay, I'm going to go over this with a clear mind and see if, in fact, this is obviously an accident, and he did run into a tree, well, then it was just an act of God, and I would stand down. But what happened was just the opposite. When I got into the autopsy, on the very first page, there was bits and pieces that didn't fit. And then it was like second page, third page, fourth, fifth, sixth. And as we went through the autopsy, it was every single page of the autopsy did not fit into the idea that Sonny simply lost his way and smacked a tree. And I'm absolutely positive after completing my secondary report and investigation on Sonny's death, that he was, in fact, murdered to stop that major inquiry that he was about to begin in the United States Congress. And it's just one piece right after another when you go over it all, and we were able to get the actual live footage up on the ski slopes taken of the where he had his theoretically had his accident, and that even shows to be almost an impossibility that he could have run into the tree in the manner that they showed. Then there was all sorts of small bits and pieces, like a tremendous amount of blood on the back of his coat and his jacket and his clothing, a huge amount of blood that soaked through all 3 layers of clothing on the back, and there was no injury to his back. So that meant the blood, that extreme amount of blood, came from someone else. And I believe it came from one of possibly 2 people that had accosted and grabbed Sonny and had struck him. I'm positive the laboratory test that we carried out indicates that he was probably killed, I'm almost positive, by being pistol whipped in the head by a person who was left-handed, facing him straight on, and someone else holding and grappling and holding him with in the back, and probably got a bloody nose sufficiently to make that extraordinary, strange amount of blood on the back of Sonny's jacket. And then it goes on and on. My report shows many, many specifics that would just completely prove the case that Sonny was murdered. Now, and of course, the timing, that speaks for itself. It was extraordinary bad coincidence if, in fact, he was only another 4 or 5 days he was going to be returning and beginning the investigation into drug smuggling and money laundering at the high level of our own government. Sonny had been involved with chasing other similar situations in terms of investigating drugs, and this was the first chance that he had to do it at such a high level, with the ability to subpoena those people that were involved. We had uncovered money laundering trail, the money laundering of millions of dollars, and we had all the specific information. I even had bank account numbers and transfers of drugs money in and out at the highest level of our government. We even have a situation that I had discovered and all of the paperwork trail showing where the United States Treasury had made direct financial deposits into drug operations.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Bob, you go right ahead.
Well, the reason that I mentioned at the beginning that I mentioned the Michael Jackson situation with them showing such a tremendous amount of interest in his death, and of course we had the same thing with Elvis Presley's death, and turned out that his death was probably brought on by the narcotic overuse, but that was not my concern or my personal feeling as much as the idea that there was so much attention given to these performers who have had these unusual deaths, when in fact we were unable to get any assistance with major media with the fact that Sonny Bono was murdered. My report is something that if things were being done straight, we would have police, the appropriate policing agencies, whether it was the FBI or Secret Service, and of course the sheriff who originally did the investigating is still the sheriff, so he's not very cooperative at all. He's been polite, but he's not been cooperative. The district attorney, prosecuting district attorney in that area, also been polite but not cooperative at all. So, and of course his office, which was taken over by his wife after his death, they're not being very helpful at all. And Sonny was about to file divorce, according to statements that had been made by people that knew him, including attorneys that knew both of them, that they were about to have go into a divorce. Well, in that case, his wife would have gotten whatever she would have gotten, 25 or 50% of whatever was there. But in terms of their household, had they split. But as it turned out with the death, particularly an accidental death of the congressman, of course, his wife got everything, and she ended up being able to assume his congressional office and is now in that position. So the cooperation there is absolutely zero. So, and what bothered me, again, to get back to it, you have so much of this policing, investigative, and interest in the death of Michael Jackson and some other major performers. Also had the Carradine, John Carradine, David Carradine, that died, and they had the complete investigation on his death. And I cannot get anyone to move forward with the Sonny Bono investigation. And if you go over my DVD reports, the one I sent to him, to Sonny, and which I believe caused his death, and the one that we finished investigating him, if you go over that, and if a person can look you straight in the face and say that they still think it was an accident, then it's because they've been drinking. I mean, there's no way that you can go over my final investigation and still say and believe that it was an accident up on the ski slopes. It's just outrageous.
And actually, of course, he was killed, or not on the ski slope. He was actually over in the trees some distance away. How would he have gotten off the major ski slope 100 feet off there, where all sorts of trees and rocks, and really there was no way he could have easily skied in that area. Hold on, we'll be back here in just a moment with Bob Fletcher. Well, this is Dr. Stan, our guest this evening, Bob Fletcher, who's prepared a great video report on the death of Sonny Bono, which we carry. We also carry the report going into the CIA and drugs and involvement of people at the highest levels of the American government. It was based upon that report that Sonny was going to open congressional investigations and subpoena people going into the background that the CIA is involved in the drug smuggling. Everybody in the world knows that the CIA is involved in the drug smuggling other than the American people. This is totally blacked out by the media, but certainly if we've talked to people from other countries, they understand what's going on. They understand that on one hand, America has a war on drugs. On the other hand, America, at least the dark side of our intelligence agencies, are creating hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps billions of dollars, to fund black operations throughout the world from the drug trade. And of course, drugs are very expensive because we actually are involved in their growth and their distribution. Why, simply when we control Afghanistan, have we steadfastly refused to try to destroy the opium crop there? When the wicked Taliban were in power, why, there was very little in the way of opium being grown. Now that the heroic American forces are there, why, they have the biggest opium crops that they've ever had. Why is that happening? Well, Sonny Bono was going to ask a lot of embarrassing questions, but of course he never got a chance to call for the congressional investigations. He died on the ski slopes, but where he actually died was a long way away from the regular ski run, wasn't it, Bob?
Well, yes and no. It basically, yes, you have the ski slope itself, which of course is a clear terrain with plenty of space both left to right as you're going down any of the ski slope hills there and skiing. But the area where he was found was 100 feet to 120 feet inside the tree line off to the right of where he was going down. Now, so In terms of whether it was a regular ski slope, no. But people do go in and around and about the tree area. But when you do that, first off, this is an important point. You don't do it fast. You can't do it fast. It's one of these things where really a highly skilled skier, which, by the way, Sonny was. Sonny was considered to be not just good, but expert. He was really good. And not like myself. I can't ski worth a darn. I've done it a couple times and was smart enough to not go back. But the area where he was found, it's impossible to go fast enough to smack the tree hard enough with a big enough velocity to just kill yourself. It'd be very, very difficult. It might happen, but very difficult. But it eliminates the idea that because someone had erroneously written once or twice in a few news releases that he had just drifted off, maybe was going high speed and drifted off and struck a tree. Well, that's not the case. He was, like you mentioned, not on the regular slope itself, but 100 to 120 feet inside the tree line. So he didn't just veer off to the left or the right and smack a tree at a high speed.
Well, weren't there some other trees around there down that he really would have had to have gone over before he could hit the tree?
Absolutely.
Oh, rocks.
That was it's unbelievably visible on again after. Gosh, it took me some 6 months to get a hold of the footage, but we were able to get the footage that was shot of the exact tree and the location and the surrounding area that was shot physically the day after when the sun came up, and there was still the yellow police tape up and all of that, accident scene tape that was up around on the trees. The tree that he theoretically struck, the handfuls of things that just didn't make sense at the site. One of them was that there was a large, like an 18-inch diameter tree, a big old thing that was a log that was now down and laying horizontally right in front of the tree that he theoretically struck. So he would have had to have hit, and it was quite snow-covered, but not enough that you can't see it. And he would have struck that first. Then there were boulders and rocks and things around in several other parts surrounding this particular group of trees, and then also there was even a bush on one part of it. And so somehow they tried to tell us that he still struck this tree at such a velocity that it killed him instantly. And also, very important, and even the sheriff admitted it, and we have that on videotape, the sheriff and also the autopsy verified, and the sheriff says on a live video, which we have included in our report, that Sonny apparently never put his hands up to stop himself from running into the tree. Now, it strikes me as that unto itself should have been a sufficient red flag for somebody to say, hey, let's look at this thing carefully. That doesn't make sense. And that's not counting other technical parts of the autopsy that didn't fit, and, of course, the blood on his back, which did not fit because he had no wounds on his back. But the idea that anyone can be skiing at any velocity fast enough that looks like you're going to hit a tree, you automatically, by natural response, you will automatically put your hands up in front of your face, particularly if you're going head-on into a tree. There were no wounds to his hands whatsoever to indicate that it appeared he had done that. Therefore, both the sheriff and the autopsy, the doctor that did the autopsy, both specifically said that apparently he did not try to fend off the tree collision with his hands. That's ridiculous, all right, for starters. That just does not make sense. And if he was my son, or if he was my brother, or if he was my husband, etc., I would certainly want somebody to look more closely into his death, just on the basis of those points. And again, like I said, the location was such that it was almost impossible to reach any high speed. Then when you look closely at the autopsy, I find out that, in fact, he had no trauma to his neck. And many people, most people, as a matter of fact, that when they run in, if you have an automobile accident, or if you run into a tree at a high enough velocity on a motorcycle, or you run into it on skis, most people actually die or are seriously injured because of trauma to the neck. You either get a broken neck or you get a serious, many people end up being crippled, and it's from the broken neck, and of course the spinal cord being affected, from the head being jerked, slammed back. Sonny had no injury to his neck at all, no trauma to his neck. Now, if someone strikes you with a pistol, if you are pistol whipped, or if you were hit with a blackjack or a pipe or an iron bar or anything like that, or a fire poker from the fireplace or something like that, the person's hit in the head a couple of times violently, that will kill you. But it will not necessarily give you the trauma to the neck that you will get 95% of the time if you ran into a tree fast enough to kill yourself. So that was another point of the autopsy that was outrageous, besides the blood on the back with no injury. And then also the injury was described as, and it was sort of to the right upper forehead and that area to the head, sort of to the frontal area of the forehead and the right side. And what was very important in the autopsy, small technical point maybe, but that the bone was described, where it was actually in his skull, that was described as having a couple of places that were of a curved and a curvature of the bone itself, where he had supposedly struck the tree. Well, the reality is, if you strike a tree with an 24-inch diameter, and you're wearing a wool cap, and you smack it, the chances of you getting indented circular curvature indentions in the skull is almost impossible. And particularly the size, and the particular size was such that it would fit the front barrel of a .45 gun if you were pistol whipped, but it certainly will not fit in the diameter of an 18-inch diameter tree. So that was another bizarre little point that was right there in the paperwork, still is in the paperwork, and nobody seems to care. Additionally, the hat that I referred to, which was a wool ski cap type hat that Sonny was wearing, had disappeared. It never even arrived, apparently, at the doctor's office for the autopsy. Someplace between the time that Sonny theoretically struck the tree and the time that his body arrived for the investigative autopsy, the hat he was wearing vanished. Now, that's very important because, number one, it would prove the other side's point by showing possibly blood and particulate matter on the inside of this little knitted hat, or wool cap, and also possibly wood debris from the bark on the outside. But with the hat gone, the cap gone, ski cap, with it just vanishing, we do not have it for evidence. We do not have the goggles. They've also disappeared someplace along the line. That also would have shown, because he was wearing the typical snow goggles, and those would have been broken or whatever the case was. But they're gone also. They've vanished and don't show up on the inventory of goods. And then even there's another small point that's never been proven that was brought to my attention by the lawyer that was working with Sonny's mother, and that was that there appears to be a special ring that Sonny always wore, had been wearing it for years. He had had it made for himself, particularly several years earlier, as a pinky finger ring, and apparently that's gone. That did not show up in the inventory either. Now, whether somebody that would carry out a assassination for hire, a paid hit, whether one of those guys involved with that took that ring with him when he had killed Sonny or not, I don't know. That's, again, another piece of evidentiary material goods that absolutely has disappeared and apparently was not with the inventory at all.
Well, now, why did the sheriff and the district attorney refuse to investigate any further? If you raised the question that this certainly had earmarks of a murder rather than an accident.
Well, I don't know. And again, of course, one point. Let's put it this way: if the sheriff, by the way, the sheriff is still there. The sheriff that carried out this investigation. And I can briefly read you a letter that was sent to myself after I brought these points forward to them. He says in his letter to me, he says, "Dear Mr. Fletcher, I have received your request for a copy of our investigative report surrounding the death of Sonny Bono at Heavenly Ski Resort. I am prohibited by law from releasing certain documents associated with deaths that occur in this county." See, now that's true, and there's a separate point that I'll mention in just a moment. He goes on and saying specifically, I cannot release autopsy reports and medical reports of the deceased. The only document that I can provide you is the coroner's official record. If you desire that report, I will send it to you. He also went on and says, finally, I must tell you that there was nothing in our investigation to suggest that Mr. Bono's death was anything but an accident. Accidents such as that are quite common in the Tahoe area. Additionally, because of the status of Mr. Bono, we took additional precautions to ensure the accuracy of the coroner's investigation. Period. And that's it. They never went any farther beyond that with any manner at all. Now, I had requested from the sheriff, I had requested all of the autopsy, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what he did not know when he wrote this to me was that I already had all of the autopsy in general. I already had that. It had been supplied to me through the attorney, and that was part of the original inquiry for Mrs. Bono, Sonny's mother. So I already had all of that. I was just trying to find out, because there were other little bits and pieces of documentation, such as interviews by the witnesses of the people that had found the body, where they found it, when they found it, how they found it, and things of that sort. I was trying to get that. But for him to say, for example, that they had gone into taking special additional precautions to ensure accuracy, that's ridiculous. Because of course, having the coroner's complete investigation, I know that they didn't. That was baloney. Why in the world he would even say that? Or because I must say this also, no other investigation by any law enforcement ever took place in Sonny's case. Not the Secret Service, not the FBI, or any other office other than the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. They're the only ones that did it. And the sheriff, Ron Perini. That was it. So there was no extra special. Didn't bring anybody else in to go over this or anything. So that's a line of baloney. The statement that accidents like this happen all the time, his statement was, accidents such as that are quite common. I don't know how common it is, number one, that somebody dies, because the truth is there's only one out of like 50 million skiers a year that die. 1 out of 50 million does not sound like a common thing. And for him, of course, to equate the death of a congressman as being common is also ludicrous. So why, I don't know. And likewise, I must say this. I had gotten a hold of the district attorney. They were pretty much the same way. They were very polite, but they did not cooperate. I did get from the district attorney's office a list of the inventory of goods that were found on the body, and that was partly where we discovered, number one, that the hat and the glasses were gone, the goggles and the hat were gone. I had already noticed that they did not show up in the inventory of the autopsy, and they did not show up at the police the report. So someplace that's vanished. Nobody seems to care about that. Nobody seems to care about the fact that a congressman of the United States government about to get into a major investigation was dead up on the ski slopes under unusual situation. It's bewildering. I can't, like I said originally when we started the program, we had all of this unbelievable attention for a rock and roll singer, not to take anything away from Michael Jackson as a performer or any of these other folks, but to have that amount of attention and to not be able to get anyone. I haven't even had anybody seriously challenge me. You know, I totally open up the door. I don't necessarily want somebody to just say, "Oh, well, you're right," and go along with what I said. I haven't even had anybody challenge me. There's nobody in major media, not a congressman, not a senator, not a police agency, not an officer, anybody has stepped forward, and it could be for good reason. If you're going to challenge me, then you're going to have to listen and go over what I've done.
Oh, of course, the thing is that if they totally ignore you, why, nobody would know there's a problem. In other words, if they challenge you, that leads as a controversy. If they ignore you, why, of course, your message will be lost forever.
That's right. I would rather have somebody come forward at a high level of whatever, whether it's law enforcement or newspapers or whatever, major media of any sort, and have them say, you know, Mr. Fletcher, you are completely nuts. It's all it would need that, and then let me respond. You know, let me respond to that kind of a statement. Or if I'm out in left field someplace, let me respond to that kind of a statement, because we've had none of it at all. And like you said, if you just ignore it, then you don't have to answer any questions or ask any questions that may give good answers. Because the investigations we've done totally stand on their own, and I invite everybody that's listening, if you have not seen our report, if you have not seen the report on the drugs connections to the CIA and other agencies, or you haven't seen the Sonny Bono investigations, you've got to get them and get a look at them. It's imperative. And then I also invite you to send a copy to any senator, any congressman, any police agency that you know, anyone at all that could help us out. You send a copy to them, and let's see what happens with it. But it's the idea that it's just been totally ignored is whatever. It's bewildering.
Well, you know, of course, Senator Wellstone challenged the Bush administration as far as going into Afghanistan. His plane and everyone on it was killed in December of 2001. Certainly we know that Senator Tower, who was former Secretary of Defense, who was raising a lot of serious questions why he died in an airplane crash. We know that Congressman Larry McDonald, actually in KAL, Korean Flight 700, and of course when they did find the plane, there were no bodies in it. No bodies, no luggage. How could that possibly be? Of course, you've never heard these stories, and we could go down the line. The case of Ron Brown, a former Secretary of Commerce, when they had a bullet hole in his head, supposedly he died in an airplane crash. We'll be right back. Well, you got 3 minutes to wrap up the program, Bob.
Well, like I said, I sincerely invite anybody at all that cares, even if you just like Sonny and Cher as a performing group, and it bothers you, or if you have a spot in your heart for honesty and want to help out, get a copy. Either get a copy from Stan, or get a copy by contacting us here at Bob Fletcher's investigations.com, and we'll be glad to send the DVD investigations to you, and then you make your own decision. But gosh, I don't know when you can get away with murder just on a regular basis, and so many of these events have taken place, and people have been able to get away with murder for so long. It's very scary. I don't know what kind of a future the country has when you have the ability up there out of Washington, D.C. to just kill people that are causing problems and then stamp their investigations top secret so nobody else can look into it. Now, listen, thanks a lot, Stan. God bless you, and you keep up the good work that you're doing. And I look forward to coming back, and we'll talk about one of these other outrageous investigations again sometime.
God bless. Thanks very much, Bob. Always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.